Finally, after about 6 months, nothing allowed this phone to come into America, with a caveat that honestly means, well, nothing. Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review, and I promise to stop joking about the name of this phone and just review it instead. Let's get started. Now let's talk about it, the design. Of course, the back is where people are most curious about, but let's start with the front. We start with the 6.55-inch flexible OLED display that is 1080p and has a refresh rate of 120 Hz. Yes, the iPhone SE price device has an iPhone 11 Pro Max screen size with almost the same ratio and the same refresh rate as an iPhone 13/14 Pro. There's a little hole punch for the front camera, allowing for face unlock, with the option of using the in-screen optical fingerprint scanner, which both work well. The face unlock could be better. I've programmed my face twice in this phone, and it still has trouble in low or even medium light situations. The rest of the display is not only flat, but it's very appealing with minimal bezels and screen quality that rivals flagship devices. With HDR support, we get 500 nits of brightness, with 1200 nits showing up when you're viewing HDR content. For me, it seemed pretty bright with normal usage, and was closer to good than to terrible when used in sunlight. Personally, I believe that the screen alone makes this phone work because it just looks so smooth and the colors pop thanks to that inclusion of the OLED display. With that said, this phone is pretty big, being iPhone 14 Pro size, so not that good if you want something smaller. As for the frame, we get a nice aluminum band going around the phone, and of course helps remind me of what the iPhone 12 looks like. Coming in at a little under 194 grams, this phone is technically heavy, but still feels pretty good for its size. On the top, we get the microphone, while the left side stores the volume buttons and the right side stores the power button. On the bottom, we have a similar setup to, well, most phones nowadays, with the dual SIM tray, microphone, USB-C 2.0, which is alright given the price and the specs, but still strange to see. Then we have the loudspeaker that pairs with the top earpiece and gives you a stereo set, which is fine. I'm not getting the issue of the top sounding much quieter than the bottom one, so I would say that it is stereo, or at least close enough, but the quality is just kind of tinny, lacking about half the bass of what you would get on an iPhone, and making some talking voices sound slightly annoying. Personally, I would rely on wireless buds because yes, there's no headset jack. Not surprising by a company that's run by the co-founder of OnePlus, just a strange omission for the size and the price point, but that might be because they sell wireless buds. And now we can move to the back of the phone. Just like the front, this is Gorilla Glass 5, and as you can see, it's transparent. On the top, we have the dual camera setup, a microphone, and a flash unit. As you can also see, there is a wireless charging coil, allowing for 15 watts of wireless charging and 5 watts of reverse wireless charging, making this most likely the cheapest phone that you can buy new with power sharing. And then we have the lights, or as Nothing calls it, the glyphs. This is an array of over 900 LEDs, also you can get things like this, a ringtone or notification light show. We get the exclamation point on the bottom, the MagSafe magnet ring in the middle, a C around the cameras, and this little bar in the corner. And if you look really closely, you can actually see each individual LED. And when you get a call or notification, all of these light up, or most of them. It has a charging meter that reacts to movement, though having a permanent or pulsing option would be cool. Then it also lights up when you have the Google Assistant going, but actually it's not. It's only when you talk. It should be when the assistant talks as well, but I guess they didn't think that was cool. And that's it. It does do a custom show when you have a ringtone that you choose to import, so that's kind of cool, but the novelty kind of wears off if you're someone like me. I never have my phone face down on a table, so it's either in my pocket or on the table facing up. So for me, the lights kind of lose its appeal. And they don't really pulse or anything like that. They kind of just go one time, and then that's it. Still, just like the little red LED for when you're doing video recording, it's a nice addition that makes this phone stand out and feel new, and also pretty awesome that you can turn it off if you don't want it. Of course, without the glyphs, this phone would just look like a normal iPhone. I always say that some random category is the most important part of the device, but truly, using the phone is the most important thing. If the phone experience is trash, so is the rest of the phone. And this is where the phone shows that it's a jack of all trades and master of, well, let's just say some. Even going back to the glyph system, it's a cool addition to a phone. Technically, RGB would have been the first version that you would see in other phones, so this system is not entirely new, but it's definitely different. One thing I do wish is that you can turn this on as like a flashlight alternative, but you can already actually use this for photos and videos as a fill light. With that said, the cameras have to be good for that. Well, they're okay. Similar to the Asus Zenfone 9, we get a dual camera setup with one being an optically stabilized main sensor and the other is a focusable ultra-wide sensor. Both of those sensors are 50 megapixels and sound amazing on paper and mixed in quality. While we do get macro shots, it does come from the ultra-wide sensor and as usual needs a lot of light. And surprisingly, these sensors don't do that well in low light. They also aren't the best for video, allowing for 4K up to 30 frames per second and 1080p up to 60 frames per second. You can actually capture HDR content, but only at 1080p 30 frames per second. Clearly, video is not the main focus, and that also goes into the camera itself. Both give passable shots, definitely not the worst in its price range, but it just falls short in lack of optimization, I guess. The front camera is a fixed focus 16 megapixel sensor with 1080p 30 for video, so don't expect the world out of this sensor. I wish the camera setup was better. Maybe with software updates it will get better. For now, I'm just not that happy. Speaking of, this now runs Android 13 in beta, being the Nothing OS 1.5.1 at the time of filming, but honestly this phone runs really smooth. I've only seen a few frames drop from having multiple apps running, but overall it's a pretty smooth phone with this beta software, especially one with a Snapdragon 778G Plus chip inside. Games actually look good and run well, and this is coming from the 8GB RAM model. There are 3 phone options with 8 or 12 GB of RAM and 128 or 256 GB of UFS 3.1 storage. This chip also means that you get 5G support, but it is pretty limited in the United States. Actually, 5G is only supported on band 41 on T-Mobile, as there's no other 5G bands that AT&T or Verizon support. LTE works fine on all carriers, but if you need 5G in the US, you need T-Mobile. Then to power all of this, we get a 4,500 milliamp cell that charges up to 33 watts wired, and like I said, 15 watts of wireless charging. I've heard some people say that the battery life is outstanding or really good, but I'm looking at maybe 2 to 3 hours of screen on time total, which is fine for me. Getting through the day is easy, but for a heavy user, carry a charger. This might be due to the always on display, but if that's true, I'm still going to keep it on. This mixed with lift to wake, tap to wake, and double tap to sleep all remind me that the software is what makes this phone almost perfect. What isn't perfect is a vibrating mechanism, which can be loud if it's not in your hands. The processor, battery, and camera are all okay and work well with the price point, but I feel like the software is where this phone excels. I didn't find myself wishing for things other than maybe app drawer folders. I mean, we're ultimately running a clean, almost stock Android experience that has some new takes on existing things, like the quick settings toggle allowing for Wi-Fi and cellular to be separated. It's been almost 2 years since you've changed this, Google. Bring it back to the pixels. You even get little stuff like typing the lock screen password and not having to click enter, though I would never really need to do that because Face Unlock works pretty well, and if it doesn't, I have the fingerprint scanner. I find things like the lack of an SD card reader and headset jack to be, well, little things. Even if the rest of the phone isn't the best, it still isn't bad. Now, this is my question because Nothing is technically a new company. If they follow OnePlus's footsteps, then they might have a few years of really good products. Let me point out that the company Nothing sells technically 4 products at this time, and none of them go over $500. I mean, this phone cost me $299 even, or $307.97 after fees. I can safely say that buying this phone new is actually a good deal. But of course, that's when dealing with the beta membership program that's only in the United States, but also subject to change. Also with that, you only get the black phone at 8GB RAM and 128GB of storage, while the white one or 256GB models will require importing. But what if Nothing fails? What if they pull an essential phone and just make one phone and then they go out of business? So far, this phone is over 6 months into their 3 years of Android updates and 4 years of security patches. And Nothing shows no sign of slowing down or failing, especially when the US beta program is actually giving you a cheaper price for the exact same phone that the rest of the world would get. We get good feature benefits that aren't entirely top of the line, like Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2, but you must also know that this is a IP53 dust and water resistant phone, meaning that rain is fine, but submersion or pressure means bye-bye Nothing. But I believe in Nothing. the company, and think that you should too. However, I can go over to XDA developers and use a custom ROM if nothing decides to go away or abandon this phone in the next couple of years. Now, in the used market, I would take the OnePlus 9 Pro over this phone, especially if they close the beta program and the price goes back to the normal importing price of over $400. But at $300, this beats a lot of budget devices that your carrier will sell. Yes, it's lacking in 5G bands, but I also have no issue with cell connectivity outside of that, and even then, I'm pulling some solid download speeds over that one 5G band. Besides that, like I said, this phone is the jack of all trades and the master of some. You thought I was going to say nothing. And that's the end of my review of the Nothing Phone 1, the phone that surprisingly has something going for it. But what do you think? Is the glyph set the only reason to get this phone? Let me know what you think, and as always, thanks for watching.